Let's also talk about the sort of lobbying games that are playing out in Washington. We have some of those details available now because US law, one, lobbying is legal. It is also encouraged. I think this needs to be said because for us, it's very alien to imagine that lobbying is legal. One is lobbying is legal. Two, it's encouraged. But we now have filings available. Filings of the lobbying firm used by the Pakistanis, filings for the lobbying firms used by us. And there's a lot of reporting going on it here in India as well. I don't know if you had time to look at it, but basically two things seem to emerge. One is that on the day of the ceasefire, this is first reported in the Hindu. On the day of the ceasefire, there was an outreach or an attempted outreach with three key officials, including Ricky Gill, who's been awarded by Trump for his role in this role, imagined or otherwise, in this Operation Sindoor time, and the Pakistanis bending over backwards, seeking almost 60 connections in that same short time period, perhaps seeking American intervention to somehow halt Operation Sindoor. Are you following these lobbying sort of details, and what can you tell us about them?
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual. If you remember about, what was it, 3 or 4 months ago, we reported extensively on what kind of lobbyists were employed, actually. It was very interesting. I remember writing a story called Schiller versus Miller, because Pakistanis employed, Kurt Schiller, who was Trump's bodyguard. And the Indians went with Jason Miller, who was actually, Trump's campaign manager at one point.
And they were both former Trump aides. I mean, it's just actually influence peddling made legal.
Absolutely. And peddling to the extent that it gets very close and personal to Trump. In the old days, you hired big lobbying firms, and I remember Aiken Gumps, was hired by India. It actually goes back to the 90s when actually we used, very personal connections on the Indian side. I remember back early 90s, there was a one-man lobbying. It was not even a firm. It was an individual named Janaki Ganju, who was close to the Gandhi family, who was India's lobbyist in Washington when I first came here. And it was during the Narasimha Rao government that India formally hired, I think Siddharth Shankar Ray was the ambassador. They formally hired a lobbying firm. But we are now back to personal connections, because that's what works with the Trump administration. It's access, it's personal access. So
there's your piece, Miller versus Schiller. Who's the real Trump whisperer?
Right. Yeah. So now we're back into this very personalized this thing, because everything about Trump is personal. Even with Venezuela, with every operation, it's all about him. I mean,
the New York Times reported that the video of Maduro dancing was the final straw for Trump, and it irritated him so much he sent the forces in.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of. It's very funny. By the way, just an amusing aside. If you remember, during the 2016 campaign, there was this former Miss Universe from Venezuela who surfaced, Alicia Machado. And it was a hilarious story, because back in 1990s, when Trump bought the Miss Universe pageant, Alicia Machado was the first Miss Universe, and apparently she put on a lot of weight, and Trump called her Miss Piggy.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this. He called her Miss Piggy. And
I do remember. Now that you remind me, I do remember.
Venezuela, by the way, before Trump bought the Miss Universe pageant, Venezuela produced a series of Miss Universes. I think they have the maximum number of Miss Universes, by the way, in the record. And then because she was Latina and she had an accent, he called her Miss Housekeeping. And he really has this thing about, Latin American countries, about African countries. He doesn't like them, and he's very open and transparent. He's very contemptuous about these countries. And Venezuela really irritated him, because, it was, for good or bad, doing its own thing, like Ambassador Sinha pointed out, with China, with Russia, with Iran. And Venezuela has had long ties with the United States, and very close ties in the oil industry. You've lived in the US, so you'd remember there's a gas company called Citgo. I mean, there are Citgo gas stations everywhere in the US. It's Venezuelan owned. And when the Venezuela nationalized its oil industry, and throughout, I think Chevron still stays there, but the other companies had to exit, ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. But when Venezuela nationalized the oil industry, the U.S. retaliated by taking over Citgo. They liquidated Citgo, and it was, I think, bought by some U.S. interests. So there's this whole oil thing. And incidentally, Venezuela also produces heavy crude. And there are any number of U.S. refineries which process only heavy crude. And the U.S. itself does not have heavy crude. I mean, in Louisiana, there are half a dozen refineries which process only heavy crude. The U.S., more and more U.S. Output is light crude, particularly that from fracking. The only other heavy crude comes from Canada, with which U.S. has adversarial relations. So there are any number of refineries in Louisiana looking, to process heavy crude. So there's that whole oil angle. And to be honest, everything is about money and business here. It's not about, democracy, nation building. I mean, aside from, reasserting its influence in the American hemisphere, it's also about money and commerce. And the fact is, the United States consistently, the US has literally wiped out India's shrimp industry. Why? Because they suddenly realized, there are farmers shrimp farmers in Louisiana who are going down under. Yeah. Right? There's this whole revival of shrimp industry in Louisiana because of the tariffs. And and Louisiana is one of the poorest American states, and there is a genuine feeling among the MAGA people that we should lift up our poorest states. So all this plays into the largest part of, we need to reassert American influence. There are genuine, economic considerations.
Yeah, but the idea, Chidanand, and I want to bring this to General Sharma. The idea when Trump first came was that the man is going to be so distracted and obsessed with domestic concerns that MAGA is about making America great again at home. But actually what Trump is demonstrating is that it's also about showing that America can be great again on the world's, in his mind, great. Can be the global bully that it has often been accused of being on the world stage as well. And this has implications for everybody in the world, including India. So, General Sharma, I want to bring you in. As we speak, firstly, the White House has been releasing images like the one that you see on your screen. These are official releases from the White House and, the, X handle, just unimaginable for the way we are used to conducting public discourse. But put that aside. As we speak, you have a high-level contact between Bangladesh and Pakistan, military to military, that is taking place as we speak. Bangladesh has been cited by many, many top diplomats as an example of possible American regime change, never owned, never claimed, like Venezuela, unfolding in the Biden years. Now, look at this from an India point of view. How many balls are up in the air? You have, as Ambassador Sinha said, the concern that in exchange for Trump looking the other way, China might go in for Taiwan. The Americans and the Chinese cut a deal. You have Chinese interests in Bangladesh. You have Chinese interests in Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka. You have China and Pakistan, Pakistan being almost a vassal state of China. You have Pakistan cozying up to both America and Bangladesh. From an Indian point of view, these are a lot of potential security challenges right there.
So, Barkha, it's a turbulent world, yeah. This is not the kind of world we have seen it. We have to be prepared for, which I said last time also on your show. This is not a time to write minute sheets and noting sheets and to say we have a 10-year program. It's a daily feature. Every day, evening, something new comes up on some part of the world which affects us, and we have to be on top of it. So the point what you're raising is that there is a dynamism at flow here, and we have to be prepared for it. Now, whether if the Pakistan and Bangladesh are shaking hands, and so be it. Yeah, there is a vacuum created in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is probably unable to meet also the expenditure on the weaponry and all that ports that the Chinese had built into Bangladesh. So it was advantageous now to take on Pakistan. Pakistan has also been supplying to many other countries. So be it. We have to keep a watch for it. These things would happen, and these things are nothing new that is happening. So I would say that let me put it that there is in the region there is a whole lot of dynamism, a whole lot of differences happening, whole lot of challenges happening. We are in Myanmar is having elections, Bangladesh is having election next month. Nepal is around the corner for having elections here. There is and elections are also not simple elections. They are the most difficult elections that are going to happen here. And God alone knows how things would change. We can't interfere and we can't take a step back and not being involved into what's going to happen in these countries. So that's one part. The second is that about, see, China has been spoken of earlier. The fact of the matter is Chinese is a founded country. They are bedded in. They are not jerky in responses to most issues, unlike what the Americans do. Firstly, the Americans to do this operation would have taken at least 5 to 6 months of training. It can't be done in one day because they created a replica of the entire palace where the president stays, and how there were 500-600 aircrafts in the air. There were so many things moving. It's a joint operation, so the decision may have been taken 1 month ago, but the whole planning would have started maybe in August, if not earlier. So to say that it is knee jerk, it's not knee jerk. But Chinese are thinking of Taiwan for a very long time. They have not been. If Taiwan was Venezuela, something would have happened. The Americans would have done it, but Chinese have not done Taiwan as yet because they are bedded in. They know that it is not an easy proposition. See, I can take a mind back to Somalia, where the Americans did an operation in Clinton's time, and there was a movie also made, Black Hawk Down or something. And President Clinton got a flack on his face, and what the hell were the American troops doing in Somalia, where most of the Americans could not spell the word of Somalia, know where Somalia is on the map. But they were 17, 18. I know the bodies were dragged out of the helicopter into the streets of Somalia.
Yeah.
The operation could have been as tough as Black Hawk. So the decision taken to go ahead with the Venezuelan operation meant that a whole lot of details have been gone into, and they didn't want a repeat of what happened to American helicopter in Iran or what happens in Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
Say any other country also trying to do something similar. When we say, okay, equation can be drawn across Zelensky being picked up, or Taiwan happening, or Arunachal Pradesh happening, it's not a simple proposition. You have to be prepared for the worst to happen. Things can go wrong, and when things go wrong, the local population will not give a pat on the back. He said, why the hell were you trying a thing like this? Why did you go into this one? So I would not say that we should be taking it that there is an equation established now between United States and Venezuela, and this can be replicated into many other parts of the world. I don't think it's so simple.